Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Vice President Mike Pence gets the in-depth treatment in a new book out today. It is called The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence, and its co-authors claim Pence believes God is calling him to function as a president in waiting, and that Pence believes he can save Donald Trump's soul. CNN contributor Michael D'Antonio is one of those co-authors. He's also a Donald Trump biographer and the author of The Truth About Trump. A pleasure to have you back on, Michael. Thank you so much for coming through. Got the book. Congratulations. So it sounds like by the time Pence left high school, he was on this path. He wanted to be president. And so how successful, though, has he really been in that, or is he hoping for a promotion?
Well, he is hoping for a promotion, but he is now one step away from the Oval Office. And he told people he went to high school with that he had this ambition, and then when he went to college, he said, God intends this to happen to me. And this has been the animating ambition of his life, and it's a combination of fundraising skill. He's mad good at raising money, very conservative, pro-business politics, and then this Christian right base. He says, I'm a Christian first, a conservative second, and a Republican last. And the thing that bothered us as we investigated him is the idea of America as a pluralistic society, as a country where we're not supposed to be as tribal as he seems to be, isn't very present in his heart and mind. He's really about this special interest group.
So why is he in the shadows?
Oh, well, he's in the shadows waiting. You know, and we think of him as a president in waiting. The people around him say Mike will be ready, and by that they mean he'll be ready to govern should President Trump stumble. And, you know, he entered office, Mike Pence, as the vice president most likely to become president in 100 years. You know, Gerald Ford didn't think he was going to be president when he was in Congress and Richard Nixon got into trouble. I think Mike Pence imagines this is going to happen for him, if not soon, later.
So when you watch Mike Pence, when you watch the vice president standing behind the president at events, and you can't help but think of all of the ways they would split, right? Like you've pointed out that Mike Pence would certainly never want to separate, you know, kids from parents on the border.
I don't think so.
We don't think so. We don't think, you know, the alleged child molester Roy Moore and that whole election down in Alabama and the fact that the president supported him. We don't think that Mike Pence would, and yet he stands almost, I don't know if stoic is the word or expressionless, like he still stands by the president. You just don't really know what he's thinking.
He does, although we did know what he was thinking at that cabinet meeting last December when everyone went around the table and praised the president. Mike Pence spoke for 3 minutes, and there was a praise for him every 14 seconds. And eventually he said, it's the great honor of my life to serve you. And it's not so much about serving the American people right now as keeping Donald Trump satisfied. You know, I often think of Mike Pence as like the kid who was in the strict family, and his family was very strict. The kids were not to speak unless spoken to, and if anyone entered the room, they were to rise. But he learned how to stay out of trouble. And with Donald Trump, Mike Pence is one of the few people who never gets in trouble. He's always got this calibrated just perfectly.
The quote is this that I wanted to ask you about. The vice president actually believed he could bring Trump to Jesus, and like Jesus, he was willing to do whatever was necessary to help save Trump's soul. I mean, Trump says he's been saved as a Christian. You know, from what you're writing, do you think Pence sees it that way?
I imagine that Mike Pence thinks it's a work in progress.
A work in progress. Okay.
You know, so the conception for Mike Pence in the world of the Christian right is that he is serving a pagan king. So this is a king who may do God's work, may serve God's purpose, but he needs Mike Pence to look after him, to keep him on the straight and narrow. And the ultimate is the goal of a Pence presidency. And you know, if Donald Trump were to get into real trouble and resign, we could have a President Pence for 10 years. He could serve for 2 years, fulfilling the president's term. Then he could run once, and then he can run again. And the goal here is not for us to really pick on Mike Pence's belief system, but he's made his particular kind of Christianity the centerpiece of his political personality. And I think we have to talk about it. You know, he's very much anti-gay. He's anti-marriage equality. He wants to roll back Roe v. Wade. All of these things are religiously inspired. He has a right to those positions, but we should all be aware of them.
It is Wednesday, the 29th of August of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this Pence? And you thought it was merely an egg dish with hollandaise. No, it's a Mother May I religiosity. Really, it is. That's the kind of religiosity Mike Pence wants to bring to the fore. Mother May I. And the next thing you know, there's a cadaver in the attic telling him what to do. God speaking through her. I mean, it only makes sense to Mike Pence, wouldn't it? All right, well, enough of that. Trump is angry tweeting about Google and Facebook, too, and Twitter. They all better watch out. Also, that Hillary's server and emails were actually hacked, but by the Chinese. Okay, that makes it... That's okay, then. All right. And we got a story about Devin Nunes today, too. I just love how the Steele dossier is ostensibly tainted because of why. I still haven't figured that one out, but I haven't figured out what Benghazi was supposed to be. Well, let me put it this way. I have heard relentlessly what Benghazi is from right wing. I don't know what they are. You know, deplorables, that was one term. But I know what they say. But none of that makes sense. Jeez, I've been close enough to firefights. I know what goes on. And give me a break. Doesn't anyone remember all the BS that was going on around that time of the attack? You know, the movie and all this other BS. Right-wing propaganda. And when you look back on it, I wonder how many rubles paid for the production of some of those. They play long ball. We know that. All right. Well, what's on the rest of the menu? Well, we'll tell you right now. Here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Climate gentrification and Trump's immigration crackdown is hurting Miami's little Haiti. Yeah, well, you know, get rid of all these little ethnic neighborhoods. What are they doing here anyway? Wow, I don't know. Being Americans? California passes a trio of gun control bills, including a lifetime ban on domestic violence convicts. Well, obviously that can't stand. I mean, domestic violence convicts are the ones that should have all their rights restored. I mean, they were only doing God's work. It's right there in the Bible. It says, beat the crap out of your wife any chance you get. And a toddler is dead. thanks to Trump's zero tolerance policy. These ghouls. And I got to tell you, from the frontline soldiers all the way up through the command structure to, I don't know, Donnie Two Scoops, or is it Donnie 2 Minutes? They're going to jail. Mark my word. My middle name is Justice for a reason, Mike Pence. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where, in an embarrassing snub, a trio of British intelligence agencies refused to meet with House Intel Chairman Devin Nunes when he was secretly in London earlier this month. And Duncan Hunter tells reporters, "Leave my wife out of it," since he's perfectly capable of throwing her under the bus himself, just like he did just a few days earlier. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln rather diligently, and should he be even more diligent if she had the proper hardware and software in which to have a proper connection. So push some funds her way if you would, because she still needs to affect that final process. And it would be grand. So thank you very, 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 very much for that. And we also thank you for taking a gander to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, where the Contribute Donate buttons are located, deftly placed there by superior graphic design, I might add. I'm looking at you, Tom. Thank you for that. Please. Yes, thank you so much. The Contribute Donate buttons for Netroots Radio are an integral part to this whole operation because we are unable to do this without you. And, oh yeah, you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We have a Facebook Live thing going on, and Kelly's pretty much responsible for that, so thank you, Kelly. Keep it up. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, all one word, and I post the show notes and links diary over on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. That is a very integral part of this show, because that's where all the show notes and links are. That's why it's the show notes and links diary. You can follow the show on Facebook, and you can also follow the show on Twitter, though on Twitter you'll have to just, we're at Cookbook West. Type in West Coast Cookbook. At some point, the little prompt will show you that it's at Cookbook West. Okay. And podcasts of the show can be had and found by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. All right. What a day. What a day. It's since it's, Labor Day weekend or pre-Labor Day weekend, there's a lot of stuff that we have to get taken care of here at the grounds where the mothership of Netroots Radio is physically located, because family and friends have been cycling through, and then we'll have quite a big slew of them for the weekend, and then pretty much fall and the school year is in full swing, at least around these neck of the woods, literally. And it's and we've had some fairly good weather. There's been a threat that smoke might be brought back into the area. We're keeping our fingers crossed that is not the case, because we've had, oh my gosh, like 3 days now of really good, sweet air and blue skies. The Oregon of my youth. And being in the midst of wildfires consuming the whole West hasn't really been fun. It's been a rather choking endeavor. And so we hope that weather continues. And we'll get into the weather later on in the show, of course. But speaking of weather, now I want you to remember, weather and climate are completely two different things. And Think Progress and E.A. Crunden from Think Progress brings us this article here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, I've always made mention, sometimes joking, but always serious, that property is always more valuable when delivered vacant. And when you have an opportunity to terraform an area, there might still be some life forms scratching out in existence, but you still got to move them out of the way because, or just pave right over them, which is normally the case. But this is disaster capitalism at its finest, indeed, in terms of climate gentrification. And when you and there's a bit of a history here of how Little Haiti in Miami took shape, and it is always the case. I mean, they did this to the Black Wall Street in the Midwest, where they raised and firebombed that town because there were just too many black people, actually living an American existence and having successful businesses because of, better business practices than the surrounding white communities who had no idea about what the hell was going on, let alone be able to balance a ledger. So burn down the people who have that ability, because they're obviously insulting your way of life. And this is another one of these instances. These people built Little Haiti from hard scrabble. They were plopped down there with nothing, and they built something, and now it's prime property. Resentment is brewing in the air on the streets of Little Haiti. The bright, cheerful neighborhood booms with friendly banter and greetings between neighbors, even early in the morning on a Monday. But the lightest of conversations turns sour when the discussion shifts to the neighborhood's booming development. The developers came and make it almost impossible for a guy that makes under $25,000 a year to make it, grumbles T. Georges Laguerre, who runs Café Pays. Laguerre's Haitian cuisine made him famous in Los Angeles, but he came to Miami seeking Creole and a Haitian community. Now he feels that familial atmosphere is about to disappear, a trend locals say is thanks to mass development as well as climate change. In the midst of murals adorned with the Haitian flag and iconic Haitian figures, a number of small businesses have shuttered. To the side of the main road, cutting through Little Haiti, a large-scale mural oversees one grassy vacant lot, partitioned by a fence strewn with campaign signs in advance of yesterday's primary elections. This article is from, Monday night. Bordering the area is another larger lot where a prominent billboard foreshadows Little Haiti's imminent future. A wide-scale development project bringing 2,500 apartments and 27-story buildings to the neighborhood. We are in the final phase in the last leg of gentrification, Marlene Bastien tells Think Progress unhappily as she gestures around her. If they allow the developers to build this as is, Little Haiti as we know it will no longer exist, because there is no way that an area can survive such high scale, such density. For the longest time, we used to think that little Haiti was being taken over because of the airports and the proximity to the beach, said Bastien. We used to think that it was because of the proximity to so many important outlets. But we found out over 3 years ago that little Haiti is situated at a much higher altitude. Get it? They are now even more prized property. The waters are coming in and flooding out all the beaches and all the other places, and, people got to go somewhere. And, that looks like some pretty good property. Let's take it. And property is always more valuable when delivered vacant. And Michelle Gomez brings us the next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Well, once again, California leads the way. Lawmakers passed 3 gun control bills on Monday, including a lifetime ban on owning firearms for people convicted of domestic violence, days after a gunman in Jacksonville, Florida, opened fire at a video game tournament, killing 2 people and injuring 14. The Democratic-controlled legislature sent the domestic violence bill, as well as 2 other measures, a lifetime ban on people placed on involuntary psychiatric holds twice in 1 year, and a new standard for residents to obtain a concealed weapon permit, 8 hours of training, and pass a live fire shooting test. And that was sent to Governor Jerry Brown's desk for consideration. We must do more to ensure the safety of our survivors of domestic violence, Assemblywoman Blanco Rubio said of the bill that extends the current 10-year ban. The measures still await Brown's signature, but California will likely soon join 26 states that have passed at least 55 new gun control laws. A significant spike following the Parkland, Florida high school massacre in February, when a gunman killed 17 people, sparking a youth-led activist movement. They're just obsessed. That's what the NRA says about survivors of gun violence. You never hear about, people going through cancer treatment being obsessed with, finding a cure for cancer. It's just ghoulish. All right? You don't do it. But they do it in this case. 9 of the 26 states recently passed measures aimed at preventing domestic violence offenders from getting guns. Actually, Oregon leads the way in these recent spikes in gun control measures. We were the first state to pass any kind of gun control legislation since the Parkland shooting. State lawmakers closed the so-called boyfriend loophole, banning those convicted of domestic violence against partners that they aren't married to from purchasing guns. So, we already had a statute on the books about married couples, but not boyfriends. It was a loophole. And I got to tell you, there's people are still mad about it. And there's out-and-out domestic abusers said, yeah, I beat the bitch. That shouldn't keep me from having a gun. And there's other people that go, he has a point. Now, of course, federal law prohibits people convicted of domestic violence, misdemeanors, and abusers subject to protective orders from purchasing and possessing firearms, but there are significant limitations. For example, federal law does not apply to family members other than a spouse or a child. It also does not include non-spouse relationships, such as girlfriends and friends, and does not apply to stalkers, nor does the law require convicts to surrender their guns. This is why state lawmakers are enacting their own measures. Oliver Willis brings us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. An 18-month-old girl was sent to an ICE detention center after Trump began implementing his cruel zero-tolerance immigration policy. There, she picked up a respiratory infection, and within 6 weeks, she was dead. News reports that Yasmin Juarez crossed the Rio Grande with her daughter, named Marie, while attempting to escape violence in Guatemala. There, they had hoped to seek asylum, even as the Trump administration had been cracking down and narrowing the conditions under which immigrants can seek help in the United States. Yasmin and her child went to a South Texas family residential center in Dilley, Texas. That's where she picked up the viral pneumonia, the infection that ultimately killed her. Reporters said that doctors say the conditions at institutions like Dilley allow viruses to spread more easily and make it hard to recover. The mother is pursuing legal action against ICE, and her lawyers say that the facility in Dilley failed inexcusably in their care of the family. Instead of offering safe harbor from the life-threatening violence they were fleeing, her lawyer said, ICE detained Yasmin and her baby in a place with unsafe conditions, neglectful medical care, and inadequate supervision. This particular facility has a long history of complaints regarding inadequate child care there. And when I say child care, I don't mean babysitting. I'm talking about medical care for children. And they are, of course, contracted by Homeland Security. Doctors did put the facility under review and ended up finding major problems. They found that the facility lacked sufficient medical space, and detainees who needed medical care were held together in a gym. Sometimes those in charge put toddlers and their partners. Sometimes those in charge put toddlers and their parents in medical isolation as punishment for toddler misbehavior. Now, we know crowded facilities are petri dishes for diseases. Everybody knows that. And there are protocols in which to make it less prone to be so. But when you are a private corporation contracted by the government to torture parents and their children, you want to be cost effective, and if you're going to torture them, why give them any creature comforts? Okay, we better break away for our break because it's time for the break, and I need to take care of an allergy that is coming on. I don't know if you can tell. So when we come back from said break, we will go through weather from around the world, and then we'll finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Crazy Rich Fun. Despite being hailed as a triumph of representation, Crazy Rich Asians is at its heart a familiar love story about a woman of modest means unknowingly falling in love with a wealthy man, much to the disapproval of his family. Constance Wu, best known to TV viewers for her role on Fresh Off the Boat, steps nicely into the Cinderella role as Rachel, a self-made economics professor who has no idea that her charming boyfriend Nick, played by newcomer Henry Golding, is a scion of one of Singapore's wealthiest families. It's not until he invites her to his best friend's wedding back home that she discovers he isn't merely well off, but, well, crazy rich. Of course, not everybody loves Rachel the way Nick does. In particular, Nick's mother, Eleanor, played by Michelle Yeoh, comes to the conclusion early on that she will never accept Rachel. Indeed, in her prim suits and tidy hairdos, Eleanor appears to be channeling the ladies of the Victorian era, much admired in aristocratic Singapore when she's ordering the help around or telling her son what to do with his life. Thankfully, with the help of a fairy godmother in the guise of Nick's over-the-top cousin Oliver and Rachel's old college friend, Go Peak Lynn, played by a scene-stealing Aquafina, this fairy tale will have a happy ending. It's not a spoiler to say that it does, because we're not sharing the details. While criticism can be leveled that the film fails to seriously look at class issues or go into why an NYU economics professor like Rachel would be seen as frivolous in the eyes of Nick's mother, the best thing about this movie is that it doesn't take itself too seriously. Crazy Rich Asians is meant to be fun, and in that effort, it succeeds 1,000 times over. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
Torrential rain has been relentless for nearly 5 days, dousing the Big Island with more than 51 inches.
Hawaii dodges a direct hit from record-breaking Hurricane Lane, but receives a warning about global warming. Australia's Conservative Prime Minister ousted over climate policies. Plus,
facts of global warming demand our urgent attention, especially in Washington.
The complicated climate legacy of Senator John McCain.
All of those complications and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
In the years ahead, we're likely to see reduced water supplies, more forest fires, changes in crop production, more heat waves, and a greater intensity in storms.
Wow, John McCain, 10 years ago. Too bad his colleagues didn't pay attention. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I think we have good news, sort of, concerning Hurricane Lane and Hawaii.
Well, it's good news and maybe a little bad news as well. Hawaii did dodge a direct hit over the weekend from now Tropical Storm Lane, which is now tracking back out to sea after skirting the islands and dumping historic levels of rain that triggered widespread flooding across the island chain. Many high water rescues, but thankfully no reported deaths. Lane delivered more than 51 inches of rain. That is more than 4 feet, catapulting it into the record books as the third highest rainfall total for a tropical storm or hurricane in the United States since record keeping began nearly 70 years ago.
Wow.
And it hit 1 year to the day after Hurricane Harvey broke the all-time high rainfall record for the U.S.
Well, the hits keep on coming.
Yes, having 2 of the top 3 all-time most extreme rainstorms from hurricanes occurring in just the past 2 years is consistent with what scientists expect from a warming climate. Hurricane Lane also brought a warning for Hawaii. Lane was only the second Category 5 storm in recorded history to pass so near to the state, but a recent study from MIT and the University of Colorado Boulder projects that due to global warming increasing ocean temperatures, the most intense tropical storms near Hawaii are now predicted to increase in frequency by about 15% per decade. But the researchers also said, quote, "We can cut that increase roughly in half by reducing our fossil fuel emissions."
But as long as we don't reduce our fossil fuel emissions, the oceans will continue to warm, these storms will continue to get more frequent, and, most notably, more intense.
Indeed, they will. Reducing emissions will not be happening anytime soon in Australia.
Sorry, mate.
That's the world's biggest coal exporter. Conservative Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull was ousted from office on Friday by his right-wing climate science denier members of his own party after he attempted to set modest targets for reducing the nation's carbon emissions.
Well, that'll teach him.
Former Liberal Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, in a scathing editorial in the Sydney Morning Herald, however, however, also blamed Australian media, specifically Rupert Murdoch, owner of Sky News in the UK and Australia and Fox News Channel here in the US. He accused Rupert Murdoch of using his control of Australian media to drum Turnbull out of office and block any action on climate change, calling Murdoch, quote, a cancer eating at the heart of Australian democracy.
So it's not just Americans being played for suckers by Rupert Murdoch.
Nope. Australia is also fighting an outbreak of winter wildfires, and the province of New South Wales, which supplies a quarter of Australia's agricultural output, is officially in 100% drought amid the deepest drought in more than 50 years.
So all of these things, worsening storms, worsening wildfires, worsening droughts, were all things that John McCain, the 2008 Republican presidential candidate, warned us about 10 years ago before forgetting all about it.
Exactly. That brings us to Republican Senator John McCain of Arizona, who passed away over the weekend. Whatever you think of his complicated legacy, we just want to note for the record that Senator McCain was the last Republican leader to push for U.S. action on climate change. In 2003 and 2005, McCain sponsored groundbreaking national cap-and-trade legislation. In 2008, as the Republican presidential nominee, McCain laid out a detailed cap-and-trade policy to curb carbon emissions and fight climate change.
The facts of global warming demand our urgent attention, especially in Washington. Good stewardship, prudence, and simple common sense demand that we act to meet the challenge and act quickly.
However, after he lost the 2008 election to President Barack Obama, McCain abandoned his climate leadership role and in 2010 refused to support new cap-and-trade climate legislation in the Senate. So, literally, 2008 was the last time the Republican Party supported any real action to curb climate change.
Even John McCain's vice presidential nominee, Sarah Palin, wanted to do something about climate change as well.
How quickly things change.
Those were the days. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Those were the days, my friend. We thought they'd never end. We'd sing and dance forever and a day.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The American founders studied philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome to learn about government, but they were also familiar with newer theories of government by more recent philosophers, such as Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. They were also familiar with William Blackstone's explanations of English law, published between 1765 and 1769. Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England organized the history of English common law into 4 categories: rights of persons, rights of things, private wrongs, torts, and public wrongs, crimes. The commentaries were written to be understood by non-lawyers and became an important source of legal information for the American colonists. Blackstone, among others, famously articulated the rights of Englishmen, held dear by American colonists. Statutory as well as common law, he argued, guarantees the sanctity of an Englishman's life, liberty, and property. These rights include due process of law, the attorney-client confidentiality, equality before the law, habeas corpus, the right to confront accusers, and forbidding bills of attainder and forced self-incrimination. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network. Upset was the word of the day in Tuesday's primary for the Democratic nomination for governor of Florida.
This is a shocker. His name is Andrew Gillum. He's the mayor of Tallahassee. He led in no polls coming into tonight. I don't think he was in second place in a single poll coming into tonight. And yet Andrew Gillum is now the Democratic nominee for governor of Florida. He has upset the front runner in this race, Gwen Graham, former congresswoman. This is a famous name in Florida. Her father was a governor, a U.S. senator. What happened? Andrew Gillum, he was endorsed by Bernie Sanders in the home stretch of this campaign. A couple things to explain this. Number one, obviously he did well in his base here, but here, go down to South Florida. What really powered Gillum, Broward County here. You see, he ran up the score. This is not his home region in the state, and Gwen Graham did terribly down here. Graham was supposed to hold her own, do better up by her base. Instead, Gillum just ran up the score here. Also go down to Miami-Dade. This is Phil Levine, the third candidate in the race. This is his home base. Gillum winning this outright again. Graham finishing very, very distant third there. So Graham got crushed in South Florida here. Gillum did very well down there. He also did very well in Orlando. This is Tampa, Hillsborough County. He's actually going to win that there over Gwen Graham. That wasn't supposed to happen. Big margin for him in Jacksonville. And then how about this? Gwen Graham, this is her home base. This is where that congressional district she represented was, the Panhandle there in Florida. She was supposed to run up the score here. You can see this is Gillum's color here, this dark blue. You see some of those counties he won outright. Others he was competitive in. So all around, this is just a shocking performance. And what it does is it sets up a very interesting general election here. This is a candidate of the Democratic base, certainly Gillum, an insurgency here. I think you could call that. Who's he going to run against? He is going to run against Donald Trump's endorsed preferred candidate in the Republican, Ron DeSantis, the congressman there. He defeats Adam Putnam, establishment favorite there. The Republican establishment thought Putnam is by far, they felt, by far more electable than DeSantis. DeSantis wins this thing in a runaway. So Democrats are going to look at DeSantis and they're going to say, this is a very vulnerable Republican in a midterm year, in a midterm environment that looks good for Democrats in a state. It's been a long time since a Democrat won here.
Andrew Gillum, who could become Florida's first African-American governor, told CNN's Don Lemon how he pulled off the victory.
I think my opponents collectively spent $90 million to our $6 in this race, and my wife refers to me as Seabiscuit. We sort of were counted out at many points. People thought we would not make it, but we kept going slow and steady, retailing our way all across the state of Florida, a state of 20 million people. People didn't think we had a chance, but we did. And thanks to the outpouring of support from, again, regular, everyday working people who basically decided that they had had enough of losing. They've had enough with the status quo, and that they wanted a candidate who isn't necessarily perfect, but one who reflects their values, one who reflects the everyday lived experiences of people in this state. That's what we tried to deliver, and all over this state, that message carried. What I've said to folks, again, in all parts of this state, is that doesn't have to be a red or a blue or a purple issue. The job of the governor of the state of Florida is to do what is in the interest of all the people of the state of Florida. That's what I've committed to doing. I'm a Democrat, but most importantly, I'm a Floridian who wants to build a state that has room for everybody. And that message is what we talked about throughout the primary, and we're going to double down on that into the general. And for a voter who, again, will find me not a candidate they can choose, maybe for superficial reasons, then, God bless them. But my belief is that there are more voters with basic and common sense values who believe that we can do the right thing in this state and, again, win. And that's what's gotten us this far. That's what allowed for tonight's upset. And I believe that is what is going to make me the next governor of the great state of Florida.
In Arizona, 2 female House members will square off for the Senate as Representatives Martha McSally and Kirsten Sinema won their respective primaries, with McSally fending off right-wing crazies Kelly Ward and Joe Arpaio for the Republican nomination. In Arizona's Democratic gubernatorial primary, David Garcia, an Army veteran and education expert, won the nomination to challenge Arizona Governor Doug Ducey, giving him a chance to become the state's first Latino governor in more than 40 years. In a private meeting with a group of evangelical Christian supporters on Monday night, Trump reportedly warned of violence if Democrats take control of the House of Representatives after November's midterm elections. NBC's Chuck Todd heard a recording.
Here's what the president said in a closed-door meeting with evangelical leaders last night. This is according to recorded excerpts we at NBC News have reviewed. The president warned that if the GOP loses the midterms, quote, They will overturn everything that we've done, and they'll do it quickly and violently. And violently, he repeated. There's violence, he said again. When you look at Antifa and you look at some of these groups, these are violent people. The level of anger is unbelievable, he said. Part of it is because of some of the things I've done for you and for me and for my family, but I've done them. This November 6th election is very much a referendum on not only me, it's a referendum on your religion, it's a referendum on free speech, a referendum on the First Amendment.
The governor of Puerto Rico raised the government's official death toll for Hurricane Maria from 64 to 2,975 people following the release of a new report. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. This broadcast is on holiday until September 10th, but instead of airing repeats, we've asked some go-to foreign policy experts what they'll be paying attention to in the weeks to come. Joshua Messervy is a senior policy analyst for Africa at the Heritage Foundation and is monitoring escalating violence in central Nigeria's Middle Belt region.
What is happening here is that a long simmering tensions that have occasionally broken out into armed violence between Fulani herders. So Fulani is a large tribe in West Africa. It actually stretches across about 21 African countries. Violence between these Fulani herders, who are primarily Muslim, and the sedentary farmers, who are primarily Christian. This violence has really escalated to the point now that the estimate is that it's claiming more lives than the Boko Haram-related violence in the Northeast. The increasing danger here is that this will become very much a Muslim versus Christian battle. And in a country like Nigeria, with all of its religious tensions, that's very bad news.
And unlike fighting a terror group like Boko Haram, which governments imagine can be accomplished by simply applying force, it's not clear how Nigeria's government will be able to address grievances between the two communities in question.
This is a problem in many parts of the continent, actually, where you traditionally have very large populations that were herders or are herders. So as other groups become more settled, or as they grow in size, or as the herder populations grow in size, there are increasing contact and increasing frictions there, where the old dispensations of sharing resources and things of that nature are breaking down because of population pressures.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. All right, well, we began weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 50 degrees, a little chillier than we've had overnight. And we will be a little cooler today, according to the Weather Underground. We'll have a high upper 80s, low 90s. We'll be sunny all day. That'll be fine, yes. Winds are out of the southwest right now at about 2 miles per hour. Will increase to their usual 5 to 10 miles per hour in a few hours. And we'll have shifted then out of the west-northwest. Will then shift this evening out of the northwest, continuing their 5 to 10 mile per hour clip. Overnight lows in the mid to low 50s, and high tomorrow, 83 to 85. So mid 80s. We'll take that. And it looks like that's what we'll be having over the weekend is mid 80s. And they have taken away the active air quality advisory alert. Dry conditions will continue, though we do have a small chance of precipitation tonight and tomorrow. Pollen is low, so general pollen is low. The air quality index is at moderate, currently at 76 parts per million. So even though that air quality alert has been deactivated, moderate is pushing it right now. But compared to what we had, it's so nice. And maybe if the low pressure system that is building might push some of that smoke away or drop it to the ground, which would be even nicer. Daytime UV index remains at high at 7. That number is coming down ever so slightly, and that's because of angle of the sun, of course. Pressure is holding right now at 29.88, but low pressure is starting to creep in. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 53%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Okay. London is 66 and cloudy. Paris is 64 and cloudy. Rome is 83 and sunny. Kiev is 72 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 78 and fair. Really bad weather party weather, people, okay? Wait for a cloudy day. A cloudy, windy day would be even better, okay? Please. For your well-being and mine, my I don't know, sense of humanity, please. Okay, Hong Kong is 77 with rain. Tokyo is 79 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 46 and clear. San Francisco, California is 57 and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 87 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny, with an active heat advisory, all right? So stay cool. And you will, because the people on the playa, oh, they're getting sandblasted as we speak. So, and good for them. They ought to be. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Desai Martin from Sherblue Media brings us this first offering at the chef's table here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. And I should mention, this is the perfect time for the French 77, the official drink at West Coast Cookbook, and especially the Speakeasy part. Representative Devin Nunes, Republican of California, Fresno, has lost so much credibility as the head of the House Intelligence Committee that our global allies no longer take him seriously. In an embarrassing snub, a trio of British intelligence agencies refused to meet with him when he was in London. Nunes took a trip to London to learn more about Christopher Steele, the former British intel officer who authored the famous dossier detailing connections between Trump and Russia. Several of the allegations in the report have since been verified, but others remain unverified. You know, like incidental ones, like peeing on Obama's bed. They haven't verified that. But I like all the money laundering and all the clandestine meetings. Those have been verified. But because he can't verify that he got some prostitutes to actually pee on Obama's bed, it makes the whole dossier suspect. Don't you know? Well, Nunes sought meetings with British intel agencies MI5, MI6, and the Government Communication Headquarters, the UK's equivalent to the NSA. So they're known as the GCHQ, or GC Headquarters. I like that. On background, the security official said it was normal for such agencies to meet with members of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee, but when it came to Nunes, those agencies took a pass. The people familiar with his trip told officials at MI6, MI5, and GCHQ were wary of entertaining Nunes out of fear that he was trying to stir up a controversy. The Atlantic's Natasha Bertrand wrote that. She broke this story, too, by the way. Nunes did meet with one official, the UK's Deputy National Security Advisor. I can imagine what happened. They were back in the back room, the cloakroom, and they drew lots. And she lost. Short end of the straw. Okay. But she's well versed in these kinds of meetings anyway. She knew how to handle herself. Nunes was specifically interested in the relationship between Steele and Department of Justice official Bruce Orr. You know, the longtime FBI investigator who's brought down the Russian mob. Curious they're going after him. Oh, yeah. Well, because of these connections, Orr now has the misfortune of being the new target of Republicans seeking scapegoats to help them discredit the FBI and the Mueller probe. Now, Orr has worked on a variety of issues and is 30 years at DOJ, including Russian organized crime, and has known Steele for more than a decade. His wife worked for Fusion GPS, the American firm that hired Steele to prepare the dossier. It wasn't a foreign company. It was an American company. And they were initially hired by, one of the Petersons, I think? Was that it? Was that it? Peterson Foundation hired initially to dig up dirt on Trump, and then when he won the primary, they said, well, we were only doing it for the primary. All right. Nunes should probably worry more about his own increasing public record of misinformation and lies than about smearing Bruce Orr. The California Republican has lost so much credibility, both at home and abroad, that the intelligence agencies of America's closest ally won't even take a meeting with him.
Danser maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Danser maintenant et jeter vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
You're all Sabai of Raw Story brings us this last offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, and I don't know, maybe this guy Duncan Hunter's, the son of Duncan Hunter. Not the same guy. You think that Duncan Hunter has been representing that district for like the last 866 years. No, it's been the dad and the son because they're both named Duncan Hunter. It's really crazy. But regardless, the Duncan Hunter, the elder, was quite a piece of work in his own right, and the chip off the old block ought to be smothered in hollandaise sauce as far as I'm concerned, and maybe thrown out past Dana Point and see if a great white might pick him up. They just might. But he's blaming reporters essentially for reporting on his statement when he threw his wife under the bus. Now he's telling reporters, leave my wife alone. Now they're not saying anything about your wife. They're reporting on what you said about your wife. And obviously he wants the reporters to leave his wife alone, meaning he's perfectly capable of throwing her under the bus like he did days before. It's just that he doesn't want it reported on. Damn it. Everybody knows that in Orange County. That's how it works. That's why every single one of the Orange County housewives are divorced. Yep. Not only divorced, single. And good for them. But, these charges against Duncan Hunter are not a surprise because of the conspicuous consumption that pervades that culture in Southern California. I know it well. And it's even worse in the beach communities where this guy is from. So I hope he goes to jail and it's inland. All right. Well, we got to break away from here because we are at the end of our broadcast period for the day. Netroots Radio, of course, broadcasts the breaking news. We will visit with you tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio throughout the day and the evening for all that breaking news, because it's breaking right now. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum.